Let's go through all the different reasons that you might punch or stab somebody. All right, number 1, they're messing with your stuff and you don't want them to take your stuff. All right. Number 2, they punched or stabbed you. It might be a good reason to punch or stab them back. They're trying to hurt somebody and you're there to protect the other person that they're trying to hurt. You lost control of your emotions and they're just super, super provocative. They're an instigator and they're in your face and they pushed your buttons and now here comes the punching and the stabbing. What am I missing here? Punching. You're in a war, and the only weapon you have left is you're punching, and so maybe you punch somebody for that reason. Okay, maybe you got super liquored up, and you're just not in your right mind, and you're making terrible choices, and now you're I want to fight everybody guy. And all of us had that friend when we were in high school or college. Maybe somebody insulted your lady, and you're a dude who's real insecure about that, and you need her to feel like you super care about her and you have her back, and so you got to punch somebody or stab them. I don't know, the stabbing thing. Hopefully we just don't think about stabbing people too much. I'm super against stabbing. Well, Peter, I mean, it doesn't say Peter, but come on, it's Peter here in Matthew 26. He gets out a sword, tries to do some stabbing, goes swinging it around. And I want to think through what was going on in his head here during this particular incident before we get into thinking about the bigger things like Christianity and violence and the prophetic nature of what's going on here with Jesus getting arrested and all of that stuff. We're just talking about Peter and punching people and stabbing people. All right, here's what happened. They go to the garden in Matthew chapter 26. Jesus has the Last Supper with the disciples. He's like, hey, one of you is going to betray me. And everybody's like, what? Not me. And Jesus is probably discreetly like, no, it's actually going to be you, Judas. You're the betrayer. Just like, okay, knock yourself out. And he establishes the Last Supper. That seems like it goes great. And then they sing a hymn and they go across to the Mount of Olives. And this is the last night they're ever all going to be together like this. And Jesus is like, all right, this is very difficult for me. I'm facing down some really big stuff. I'm going to take the inner circle, these 3 guys, Peter, James, and John. You're coming with me. I'm going to go over here and pray. Keep watch with me. Stay with me here. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. And then he goes and he prays some more and everybody falls asleep. And he comes back and he's like, I thought we'd agreed that you guys were going to keep watch here because of what's going on. And probably they're like, my bad. And she's like, all right, I'm going to pray some more. And he goes and prays and he comes back there asleep again and again. And the whole thing is a prayer that is met with apparent silence from God the Father. We haven't really seen that before. This is a very difficult time for Jesus, plus all of his buddies are right now just passively letting him down, but they're going to more actively let him down very soon. And then Jesus calls his shot in verse 46. He says, all right, rise, let's go. Here comes my betrayer. I added the all right, I guess. And then verse 47, it says, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, greetings, Rabbi, and kissed him. Jesus replied, friend, do what you came for. So Jesus... he doesn't like it. This is not his favorite thing that he's ever done, but he's all in. He has prayed to his Father to say, if there's any way other than this way to do the things that I'm supposed to do, if there's any way for this cup of suffering to pass for me, I would take that. It looks like God the Father answers with silence. That is to be taken as a no. We're moving ahead with the plan as discussed. And so Jesus is coming back from that time of prayer knowing what is coming down the pike. And despite his absolute, total, acute awareness of all of the layers of things that are awful to go through, betrayal, abandonment, physical punishment, not all the way to the limits of what you can bear, past the limits, all the way to death, separation from your friends, separation from your physical mortal life, all of that's coming, yet still he faces it down with bravery. He's focused on the task. Friend, do what you came for. Jesus is in. But one of the disciples is still not in, and we know from other parallel accounts that it's Peter. It says, then the men stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him. With that, one of Jesus' companions reached for his sword, drew it out, and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. I guess I don't know off the top of my head, pun not intended, whether this was a Roman gladius, which would be like a short, kind of fat sword with a relatively small hilt to protect the hand that would have been kept along a thigh, like you see Gladiator's using are like actually like Gladiator, like Maximus Meridius, something, more Latin names from Gladiator, or if this would have been the more traditional ancient Near Eastern weapon that looked a little more like a sickle or a scythe for bringing in wheat that had fallen out of fashion by this point. But my understanding is that sometimes the everyday conceal carry would still be a blade that's a little bit more reflective of the ancient Near East at this time. My guess would be gladius. I don't know. Why does it matter? Well, because you can't stab very well with a sweeping ancient Near Eastern sword that has a little bit of an arc to it, that is a slash and open kind of sword, whereas a gladius has more multiple purposes, one of which would be thrust and stab. Again, why does it matter? Well, depending on what sword it is, we learn a little bit more about Peter's intent and what he was thinking, what was going through his head. If it's a slashing sword, then I guess that was a pretty good slash. I mean, anytime you swing a slashing sword and you take off a body part, I mean, it might not be moral, but you did what the thing is meant to do. You got to feel pretty good about that. If it's a stabbing sword, it's probably a pretty big bummer that all you got was an ear, because you were going for more than that. I don't know what he was trying to accomplish. What I know is that Jesus doesn't like the action, and he repudiates Peter's behavior immediately. Put your sword back in its place, Jesus said to him, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword. And we'll get into all of that later on. But without looking at any other passages or anything, I think we can kind of figure out which of those categories of why you would punch or stab somebody this one falls under. He is protecting someone he loves and cares about very much. He's also protecting a moment, an era, an institution. If Jesus goes away, then this moment is over, and now we're on to whatever the next moment is, and that's scary and uncharted. There's something truly beautiful and kingdomy happening here that Peter doesn't totally understand yet, and surely he doesn't want it to end. He wants to ride this forever and understand it and drink it all in for all that it is. And so he's defending a friend, but he's also defending an era, a moment, an institution, a circle of friends in defending the leader of that friend. Also, sometimes when you hit somebody, you have that moment where you turn away from them and you ball up your fist super, super tight so you can get even more momentum on that punch you're going to throw at them, as all of that pent-up rage and irritation with their unending crap boils to the surface. And I kind of think maybe there's some of that going on here with Peter too. And I guess now I'm cheating because I'm going beyond just this passage, but this guy, he can't be terribly impressed with the religious leadership. He's seen the cracks in the facade. He's been there for the weird interactions. He's had enough experience to compare and contrast between the goodness and eternality of the perspective of Jesus and his kingdom values versus the ick that is associated with these cowards and lowlives who hire a bunch of thugs to sneak around at night to do their dirty work for them. It doesn't look like Peter's punching or stabbing or slashing here because he's liquored up. I think he's in full control of his faculties. I just see a guy who loves his friend very much, who loves what he has with all of his friends very much, who's starting to see the eternal importance of who Jesus is, though clearly he doesn't fully get it yet, or he wouldn't be doing this. And I think you're seeing the actions of someone who is big, strong, used to getting his way, willing to throw his weight around to make things the way they ought to be. He is a take action guy. And look, straight up, I respect it. I don't know if I would go punching or stabbing in this situation. And yeah, I understand fully that he should have got the point right now. But in general, as a general rule, I'm going to be sympathetic to see a situation, try to solve it, and take action guy. That said, this is not terribly shrewd. He is outnumbered by a wide margin. We have no indication that the other disciples have one lick of salt or vinegar or fight in them. I don't think anybody was going to come back him up. I think they would have done the thing like the bullpen pitchers do when they run into a bench-clearing brawl from the outfield, and they're like, oh, I have to run 420 feet to go and be in a fight I had nothing to do with. All right, I'm just going to run in here to the back side of this big brawl. And all right, there, I got two hands on another one of my teammates' back, and I'm just kind of bouncing around in rhythm with everybody else, and I'm going to wear a frown. That way, I was in the fight. I'm right here. I think that's probably what you were going to get from the other 11, well, 10, as it were. Judas is already in the fight on the other side. So I don't think it's a shrewd move. I don't think it's a smart move. But more importantly, it was a move that indicates another repudiation of Jesus' commands on the part of Peter. And like I said, we're going to talk about the part about like just violence in general, and does that fit with the whole kingdom values thing. But let's just talk about this whole saga with Peter and Jesus, with him always telling Jesus how things ought to be. It does not go well. It's not a good look. We've dedicated entire episodes of this podcast to looking at different times where Peter's like, no, you're not going to do that. But specifically, since chapter 16, Peter has flexed his muscles and bowed up several times as Jesus has told him that Jesus has to die, he has to be handed over. Jesus literally described exactly what was going on at this moment in the garden. He said specifically more than once that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, chief priests, and teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. And the very next verse in Matthew 16 is Peter pulling him aside and rebuking him. No way. That is never going to happen. No, well, I'm here, Jesus. And Jesus turns to him and he says, get behind me, Satan. Look, I get why Peter didn't like it. I get why the disciples didn't like it. I wouldn't like it either. But the weird thing about this circumstance compared to like your basic college bar fight, if you got into those, or any other kind of brawl or hang with your buddies and have each other's back, is that here, Jesus has made it clear his kingdom's of another world, and he has to do this. He has to drink from this cup. And you guys, my inner circle, you have to accept it, and you have to understand what it means. Which means that what Jesus was communicating and preparing them for was, hey, guys, when the time comes, you just got to let me go. It's going to be very hard. It's going to be very strange. It's not going to be easy for me either, but you just have to let me go because I play a different role than any of your other fishing buddies or anybody else. And this is a thing that I have to do. And maybe Peter thought he was ready to pass that test in that moment of pressure. And maybe just with all that pressure, it turns out that he wasn't. Got to give a guy props for looking out for his friend. Even if that friend said 100 times, do not defend me in this situation, you still got to get the impulse. You still want that guy in a foxhole with you. At the same time, this is a truly unique and exceptional situation that is unfolding here with the role and the destiny of Jesus. And all of Peter's punching and stabbing just gets in the way of the direction it's going. And that's going to set us up for Jesus' remarks that we'll talk about next time around. Hey, thanks a ton to those of you who just signed up to support the podcast at patreon.com/the TMBH podcast. That was awesome of you and super, super encouraging. I'm trying to put more stuff on there all the time that is just a way to say thank you. Old sermons or talks that have maybe lived on this channel at one point in the past but are now taken down. I'm gradually putting those up there, maybe a couple a month. Fun things that Jeff does musically, little Easter eggs, things like that. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but I am grateful to you, and this thing wouldn't exist without you. So if you are signed up over there, please make sure to keep your email current so that you see those as I post them, because they are for you and they are meant to be a very small way to express my gratitude. I appreciate all of you who are here. Thank you so much for kicking stuff like this around with me. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.